And in 3, 2. It's movie time, and we're back again with movie time. Hope that you guys had a great week, and that you also heard our wonderful Friday podcast as well. And we are now back again on Wednesday as well. And we have an awesome guest with us, Mr. Jason Brubaker. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
That's wonderful. It's like it was a great week over so far.
Yes, so far, I mean, it's always a busy week, that's for sure.
Has the weather been nice over where you're at?
Well, the weather in Los Angeles, California is typically pretty sunny, a little bit overcast lately, and nice and cool. So that's how I like it this time of winter.
Fantastic. And normally my co-host with me, Olaf Barbosa, would be here. Unfortunately, he had a minor emergency, so he'll be a little bit late in joining us.
Oh, that's fine.
But I wanted to start off by asking you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and how it all got started?
Yeah, sure. I started out like a lot of independent filmmakers. I had, I was fresh out of college and no other vocation appealed to me more than making movies. And I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. So at that time in my life, I packed my car and I moved to New York City, and I found work working alongside an independent producer a couple years my senior. And through that process, I started out, fetching coffee and doing all that kind of stuff. But then my job responsibilities grew until one day I kind of found myself walking around with him with a notepad and serving as his right hand man, uh,
Mm-hmm.
hoping to help get some movies produced. So we met with all these different high net worth individuals, and we would pitch our product and try to get money. And long story short, I had a film that I was going to go to work on in New York, but it completely fell apart. So I found myself without a job. Uh, and fast forward, I go back to my parents' house, and my mom had turned my room into a Mary Kay studio. So I knew that I had to get. Yeah, she'd painted the walls pink, and it was wild. So I knew I had to get out to California because that's where the professionals lived and created their businesses. And I did. I moved out to LA, and within like about 2 years out living out here, I got together with a bunch of people, and we made our first feature film, this silly little zombie movie. And it was through trying to distribute our own feature film that I kind of found myself getting sucked more and more into film distribution.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, fast forward to, well, I can't fast forward too far. In the process, at one point, I had a bunch of filmmakers asking, how do you get your film on Amazon? Once it's on Amazon, how do you promote it, et cetera, et cetera? And I started blogging about it. So I started this blog called Film Making Stuff, and filmmaking stuff grew in popularity. And then more and more people got to know me. And then next thing you know, I was introduced to the folks at a company called Distribber, which is a video on demand film distribution aggregator, if you will, that helps filmmakers get their films into the popular marketplaces without taking a piece of the action or without taking ownership. And I
Mm-hmm.
just thought that was a um, really cool company. And I said, well, I have all these filmmakers that are trying to get on iTunes, and it seems like you can help filmmakers get on the iTunes. So let's make a deal. And the long short of it was, by 2012, I was hired on as their then director of operations. Um, and I stayed with him for about a year and a half, and then I went on to work for quite a few distribution entities. But in that time, a former client, Nick Soares, called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying Distributor. When I do, I want to hire you back." So I'm trying to make this the really brief story, but again, the long short of it is I'm now working at Distributor as their vice president. So it's a full-time gig, and when I'm not working at Distributor, I'm blogging about film distribution through filmmaking stuff. So it all kind of works together.
Absolutely. And it really does. Also, for a while, you were a producer's rep as well. And you were telling me a little bit about that. We were talking about that earlier. Can you tell the
Yeah,
audience a little bit more about what does a producer's representative do over as opposed to a sales agent, and a little bit more of the definitions on that?
sure. Yeah, in between, working for the various distribution entities after I left Distributor the first time, One of the gigs was working with an independent filmmaker and creating a relationship whereby he frankly paid me a consulting fee so that I could leverage my relationships and help get his film sold. And that, by definition, that's what you would consider to be a producer's rep. A lot of times people interchange the word producer's rep with a sales agent, and although they perform a similar function, they're not exactly the same. A producer's rep is a person, that's working. They work for hire. In other words, somebody pays you money to go out and do your job, regardless of the results. And a sales agent is sort of like a real estate agent. They get paid based on results through a commission. So producers rep, the good news there is how how much money you're going to make out of your efforts. But the bad news is if you score a really big deal, you probably won't benefit from the upside because you didn't take much risk on the other side of it. A lot of times producers reps get a really bad rap, and that's in part because I think there's a lot of people out there that are up to a whole bunch of shenanigans, and they probably don't do right by the filmmaker in a lot of ways, and they're all too happy to take some money. In my case, I had a personal relationship with the filmmaker. We had some mutual trust, and
Mm-hmm.
we ended up selling that film to Lakeshore Entertainment. They just formed a new digital division called Off the Dock, and that's where we made our sale. So that filmmaker and I are still friendly to this day, and in fact, we speak frequently. So there's something to be said for that. But it was through even that process of like being able to call on people that I've known for a while in the distribution landscape and get a deal going. That was all attributable to me just frankly just living, breathing, eating, sleeping film distribution for so long.
Absolutely, and it definitely does help. Um, so also in regards to that, then, so it's like that also gave a heads up, also evolution towards distribution in that. So when you're looking at distributor and the other companies that you've worked for as well and other projects, so what preferences like does your company like to work with? Do they, what kinds of filmmakers and budgets do they like?
Well, it's kind of a broad question, in the sense that I've worked for quite a few different distribution entities and also as a producer's rep. So I'll first kind of go into what the landscape looks like,
Yes.
and then we can dive into, individual kind of what thing people are looking for. But the landscape, when you make a film, your first idea is like, oh, I want to go out and make $1 million. But that very rarely happens. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Sundance and some of the other big festivals later that would
Definitely.
have you believe that everybody's just getting a multi-million-dollar check. But for the most part, there's two types of distributors. There's the traditional distributor where they will pick up your film, they'll put it out in the marketplace, and then they'll get a piece of the action every time money is transferred. So, for example, um, you go to a distributor, they put your film up on iTunes, you make, I don't know, you make $100. In that example, the first monies that come back from iTunes, so iTunes will take their cut, then the first monies that come back to iTunes go back to the distributor, and then the distributor deducts their fees from any expenses where they're trying to recoup the money. And then after that, you get paid. Um, and by the way, on top of that, the distributor still takes a cut of whatever you get paid as their distribution fee, which is typically anywhere from 15 to 30%.
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, they get a piece of the action for the next 5 to 7 years. And if they're a good distributor and doing a good job, they more than earn that fee. But unfortunately, there's a lot of distributors out there, especially in the ever-changing digital landscape, that just pick up as many films as they possibly can. They throw them into the digital platforms, and they're hoping that one of those films is going to be the breakout hit for the next quarter so that they can keep their lights on. But the big question is, well, what happens to all the other films that aren't the breakout hits? What are the distributors actually doing to move the needle and make more sales? And at the end of the day, beyond the initial honeymoon period, what we found is there's a lot of distributors that frankly forget about your film, or they don't emphasize it as much as you would hope, which means as an independent, you're going to have to go out there and hustle in order to make the sales. But here's the kicker: the distributor for the next 5 to 7 years is going to take, anywhere from 15 to 30% of every dollar you make from your efforts. So you
Uh-huh.
have to ask yourself, is that really worth it? Is it worth it to sign a distribution deal? Now, granted, if you are one of the very fortunate, few that get a good distribution deal, you know, and a minimum guarantee where they're paying you money up front no matter what, well, then maybe it's a good deal. And we certainly had a good deal with Lakeshore, but those are rare. Um, and so that leaves you with the thought like, okay, well, all these distributors are coming at me, but nobody's really offering a good deal. So therefore, I'm thinking about taking it out myself. If you have that thought, that's where the company I work for, Distributor, comes in. We have all the same, relationships with all the same outlets as a major distributor.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is you pay your own encoding. So you pay for ingestion, encoding, quality control, review, delivery, and then once the film's delivered, accounting. You pay an upfront fee. You get it into the marketplace. But on the flip side, distributors not taking, a percentage of the revenue. And a lot of filmmakers like that, especially when you compare apples to apples, and you're like, wait a second. Even if this distributor is promising marketing, a traditional distributor, even if they're promising marketing, any money that's spent in that marketing, well, heck, it's still going to come out of any money you make. They got to pay back their expenses. It's not like they're doing you a huge favor, again, unless the deal makes a lot of sense. But oftentimes, the deals don't make sense, which is where, a company like the one I work for comes into play.
Where it becomes more of an aggregator as opposed to the standard distribution model.
Exactly right. Yeah, the term aggregator I think is appropriate here. And all an aggregator means is that's a fancy term for a digital distributor that has access to the platforms, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to be the one that in a sense, you become your own distributor.
So what you're doing is also working hand in hand with the actual filmmaker itself. So it's kind of a more interactive relationship as opposed to it's like, okay, we're going to handle most of the marketing, you handle some of the marketing, you're there for the promos, all of that. It's like working it that way. It's more along the lines of each party has the control. It's like then the filmmaker also has how the marketing is going. The more that they put in, the easier it is. But as an aggregator, you're also able to get it out to the services that they would need.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're here to really just help facilitate filmmakers that are looking to get things where they need to go.
So then, that being said, it's like what kind of in terms of challenges do you find when you encounter that kind of relationship? Because again, a lot of newer filmmakers, for example, are not prepared with the deliverables for their distribution.
Well, that's the big thing too. There's a lot of filmmakers that when you hand them a deliverable guide, they take a look at it and then it gets confusing. Uh, and maybe sometimes there's mistakes that could have been prevented if they would have just picked up the phone and talked to one of our technicians. But in short, any distributor you work with or any aggregator you work with is going to have a very, very strict delivery guideline. And when that happens, you just have to abide by that because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get things from point A to point B, and they're trying to facilitate that. So follow the delivery guideline as best as you can. And if you make the delivery and there's a few hiccups, then typically two things will happen. You'll get a call, and then within that call, you'll decide whether or not you want the encoding facility to fix the problem if they can, usually for an additional fee, or you
Hmm.
could go ahead and take another crack at all the deliverables, and then go through the process again.
Well, which makes a lot of sense. Then it also, in terms of that, as an aggregator, also, what influence do you have in terms of modifications towards the filmmaker, or is it more the filmmaker to come up with the materials that would be at the level that would be needed? Because with individual filmmakers, it's like somebody cannot, not everybody is skilled at, for example, making the poster or making the trailer.
The good news is by the time a film reaches me, most filmmakers typically have a poster and they have a trailer. Now that poster may not match specifications, and the trailer might have a lot of swear words, which means they have to recut it, to kind of to make it more G-rated, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, filmmakers want to get their films into the marketplace, and we want to help. Um, so from that perspective, even if the filmmaker's not as artistically capable, we have preferred vendors or different freelancers that we can put them in touch with that can certainly help.
And it does also bring down the costs in its own way with the prints delivery and all of that by having it through this platform as an aggregator, because you do have the possibility of doing it completely digitally.
That's exactly right.
So also, and you had made mention that you had gone to Sundance as well as also other festivals like South by Southwest. Can you tell us a little bit what is changing in the distribution platforms?
Well, to be completely transparent, I've never been to South by Southwest yet, but all of my colleagues have, or I shouldn't say all of them. In a group of like 20 people, I'd say a few of them have. But my point being is, from a distribution standpoint, interestingly enough, when you try to make a deal with places like Netflix, I'll use that as an example. They love it if your film played in Sundance or South by Southwest or some of the major film festivals, because they really, what they're going to get out of that is a certain level of curation and a certain level of pedigree that helps kind of separate those independent films from other independent films, that are knocking on the door trying to find a place. But in terms of what the kind of what the changes and different things that we're seeing in the festivals, in the past Sundance, you saw all the stuff just like every year. You saw the fact that um, various entities were coming out and they're bringing their checkbook and they're paying big bucks for certain films, and that helps get national and international press. Uh, but from my perspective, being based in this stuff, it's not as though I'm seeing anything remarkably new,
Hmm.
except to say places like Amazon.com, right? They came out pretty aggressively at this past year's Sundance, offering to pay uh, at the minimum $100,000 for rights to filmmakers' films, just for being at Sundance. So that's an interesting perspective. It's something I haven't seen that much, but again, that's a good strategy. It gets Amazon more in the spotlight, and it certainly makes a lot of filmmakers happy if they take advantage of that deal. But at the end of the day, regardless of how technology changes, we're still looking at an environment where people are creating content that needs an audience, and the audience is out there saying, "I need to see content." And it's up to the distribution community to help filmmakers get from point A to point B.
Absolutely, and also understanding as well that it's like the more viable that it is, understanding the process, the end result will be that it's like a better product for the general audience. Do you find that you're also seeing more originality now that there is larger platforms to be able to distribute as opposed to just only one stream?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's I think in independent film there's always been originality. I think if anything, maybe there's less originality. And what I mean by that is production technologies increased so much in the past few years that you can now go to your local electronics store, and for a few $100s you can get a camera that produces cinematic results. Like, for example, I have an iPhone 7, and the image that this phone captures would have been like something, back when I started my career, it would have been like something out of a science fiction novel. I
Hmm.
mean, we've progressed that far. But what that means, though, unfortunately, from the perspective of content, or from the perspective of distribution or the marketplace, is we now have a lot of content out there, a ton of content, and I dare say maybe an oversupply of content, that if the filmmaker's not trying to do something that's really original, it can be tough. But here's the kicker. Here's the caveat. All the time I get emails from filmmakers that are like, "Dude, I got the coolest idea for a film. You've never heard anything like this. It's going to be amazing." And then I write back and I'm like, "Great. What?" I write back and I'm like, "Great. What genre does this film fit into?" And they're like, "Oh, it's beyond genre, dude. It doesn't fit into any genre." And my immediate thought is like, that's too bad, because that means that there's really no market for this film. And the way you gauge it, by the way, is you go on the iTunes and you look at the different categories that iTunes has, drama, science fiction, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can't fit your film into one of those boxes,
Yep.
you've hurt yourself from day one.
So also when creating the content, can you talk to me a little bit more about then targeting the audience and how it affects that process, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, not that I want to throw anybody into a box, but I kind of want to throw you in a box. I want to throw you in a box,
Yes.
but within that box, I want you to be original, right? So targeting an audience, like let's just use the example of science fiction. You know that you're going to make a science fiction film. Great. So now we got at least one part of the equation down. We know what genre you're going to fit into. But in addition to that, now it's like, okay, well, what is it about your film that makes it really interesting? Oh, it's about time travel? Really interesting. Cool. I love that. Oh, it's about a kid that goes back in time to save his parents' marriage. I love it. Who's in it? You know where I'm getting at with this.
Yes.
We start talking about like a very succinct log line, but on top of it, then the next question is who's in it, and if Michael J. Fox is in your film and it's 1985, then you've just made Back to the Future, which was revolutionary at the time. But even now, it's like, well, Jason, I can't, I'm not going to be able to put Johnny Depp or Tom Cruise in my film. My budget won't support that. And I'm like, awesome. Who else did you put in it? Could you put any, major social media stars that have some sort of following, so that you at least have something working for you from a promotional standpoint? Because later on, when you try to promote the film, the press and publicity are going to ask the exact same thing. What's your film? What's it about? Who's in it? Because they want to know the story. So you got to start building the story of your film from day one. And I would say building the story of your film is equally, if not more important, than the film itself.
Yes. And peeling the layers of the onion as well on that. Also, sure. Just as well to let you know that we've been joined by my co-host, Olaf Barbosa. Hey, Olaf.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
I'm sorry I'm late, but I've been out running around promoting my movie and everything like that, and doing everything that Jason was talking about. I was listening, so.
Well, it's nice to meet you here. nice of you to join us.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, it's like just one of those days. A little bit of family emergency I had to take care of, so everything's all good for now. So I'm here and ready.
Awesome. Well, yeah, as you probably heard, we're talking a lot about film distribution, and since you said you're out promoting a film, is there specific questions you might have that the listeners might also have?
Yeah, well, how do you make a film? Well, what I came in, you were talking about the promoting, and I just, I was just being my silly self and going, oh yeah, I was promoting the movie, that's why I'm late. Yeah, okay.
Good for you.
But then also, Jason, as well, it's like, so what do you feel like there's a lot of things that are happening in with this relationships with the sales agents. Sales agents are also starting to play a huge role in this as well, in the distribution model as well. So you've worked with a lot of independents as well as also in the industry. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about the relationship between sales agents, distributors, and some of the experience that you may have found with it?
Well, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, sales agents work on a commission, and the ones, the sales agents that you want to work with are some of the top tier agencies. They have relationships with buyers and sellers, and they serve as a middleman. And the good news here is they're working to get the absolute best and most amount of money as they possibly can moving product. Just like real estate, right? You hire a real estate agent to help you sell your home. They're going to go out and they're going to find a buyer, and they're going to hopefully match you two up. And next thing you know, you negotiate a really awesome deal. And if you're really lucky, you create some bidding wars that raises at least the perceived value of your film, which in turn, frankly, raises the value. But in terms of where sales agents are, on the domestic front, like a lot of them will have relationships with like Netflix and some of the other outlets where they'll be able to make a deal, and their goal is to get in and get out. Let's make a transaction and go. When you're talking about foreign sales agents, you may have sales agents that have relationships in different parts of Europe or all over the world. So you might have a foreign sales agent, and they'll come back to you and they'll say, "Hey, I can potentially make a deal." Well, they probably won't tell you about it because you've already signed an agreement that lets them make whatever deals they want to make. But let's just say they potentially find a deal in French-speaking Africa. So they may come back to you and say, "Hey, we just sold the rights to French-speaking Africa for the next year for X amount of dollars." And when that happens, they make a commission. But on top of that, in order to make the actual delivery to French-speaking Africa, you have to get a whole bunch of elements in play. You got to have the film, the trailer. Does French-speaking Africa for this particular outlet, do they require dubs or do they require subtitles? And where is that stuff stored? And how are you going to ship it? And who's going to pay the tariffs or any taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And guess what? At the end of the day, every expense related to that delivery comes out of that deal before you even see a penny. So you might make a deal as a foreign sales agent in French-speaking Africa for $10,000, but the filmmaker might only end up with like $1,000 till it's all said and done, and that's if they're lucky. But if they're making those kinds of deals all over the world in all sorts of various territories, it might start to add up after a while.
Okay. Now, the citation. Let me ask you this. Now, you're talking about like the sales agents and stuff like that. And okay, I'm a new to making films, and I've got the film ready and all that stuff. Is there what's the best way to start trying to locate these agents or the salespeople to start promoting? I mean, where do you look to find them at? I guess for the that's what it is. Yeah, where do you look to find them at?
I would frankly just pick up, any of the news that relate around Sundance, who made deals, who orchestrated those deals, and then out of that, reach out to the companies that seem to have done a pretty good job of making a transaction.
Oh, okay. It's like good. It's like yeah. It's like you may know how to make a film, but it's like okay, where do you find the people to sell the film?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
And also, what in terms of that, of like, where do you sell the film? What is your best territories for that? And so it can make it for a very, very challenging point at that time as well. And it's like it's balancing the artistic and business side. It's like, how do you feel like in that perspective that's the key to growing that relationship of the two sides for a lot of people? Because a lot of people, they're so in love with the artistic side, they don't understand that the business side of this as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a slow process, right? A lot of people come into the film industry and make a movie, and they believe that they're just going to make one movie and that's the end of it. It's a fallacy, but it's one that I know all too well. I mean, I had the exact same thought when I made my first feature. It's just something that we all think. We all think that we're going to have the big multi-million-dollar payday, and the rest of your life is easy street. The truth of the matter is, you got to look at filmmakers the same way business people look at entrepreneurship. It's not just about creating one business and making your whole life revolve around that one business. It's about creating multiple businesses. So you have to think with a long-term perspective, and your goal with your first film or a couple films is to leverage those films to build relationships, to get meetings with people who otherwise wouldn't take your calls, because you have a legitimate business reason to make those connections. And you'll find that if you do right by a distributor and they do right by you, then oftentimes what happens is you'll work together not just on the current project, but you'll work together on all future projects moving forward. And you'll find, too, that the community is very, very small, so everybody seems to know each other. So you better also mind your P's and Q's. We, in the distribution community, we have a no crazy policy. And I can tell you that, there was a filmmaker I worked with back in 2012, going into 2013, and the guy ruined my entire Christmas holiday break because he was just crazy.
Ay, ay, ay.
Crazy. The town, Hollywood, shuts down, and I was nice enough to take his calls, while I was out with my mom Christmas shopping, while he's yelling at me about, uh, one of these companies not getting back to him, but the company had shut down for 2 weeks. So there was no way that we would be able to move whatsoever. And anyway, in the years since, I've actually thought about this guy, and I'm secretly waiting for the day that he wants to work with me again, so I can politely decline. Because
Well,
he was so bad. It was so bad.
I guess that counts me out. You said there's a no crazy policy. It's like I'm done. I guess I can't do the movies now.
Well, you know what? I'm making that joke, but I've often brought up, within the community where I can actually mention names with my colleagues, that kind of thing, and other people have worked with this person, and they've had a similar bad experience. So when I say it's a small community, it's a small community, and people will remember you. Now they may not always remember you by name, but they'll remember your film, especially if it was one where you had a lot of negotiation around.
Right, right. Well, now let me ask you, in your experience, um, what do you feel is the best way to migrate, your risk management when you're dealing with trying to distribute the project you've been working on?
Well, I would migrate it back to yourself, and then you figure out ways to manage risk right off the bat. Um, it's funny, but the irony is the filmmakers that get the best distribution deals are the filmmakers that need a distributor the least. So, for example, if you knew how many units you needed to sell in order to break even, and you put the film on iTunes, and you had a plan for selling that amount of units, and you knew exactly how you were going to do it, and you were going to do it with or without a distributor, well, suddenly that makes you much more attractive, because now a distributor is going to see you as a viable, potentially good business partner, and they're going to think like, hey, I think I can make money off of this guy. So they're going to want to do a deal with you, um, or they'll be more inclined to do a deal with you. So your goal is to take your project and eliminate as much risk as you possibly can, um, so that at least the probability of reward seems, from a perception point of view, it seems to be much better for the filmmaker. I'm sorry, for the distributor to get into business with that filmmaker.
Huh. Makes sense.
Also, on the aggregation side, do you come in also on an earlier side as well with the projects, or do you come in at the finished film side? Because it's like doing digital distribution, it must be a different field than coming in from traditional film sides as well.
Yeah, it's slightly different. It's slightly different in the sense that as an aggregator, we're going to help you get your film wherever we can help you get it. So you don't have to go through the same kind of shenanigans that you may have to go through with, like, kind of a lesser distributor. But that said, the earlier you can come up with a film distribution strategy that you can control yourself, the better. And I would even start it from like day one of production. It's like, how many units do we have to, or first of all, who's my target audience? How am I going to reach my target audience? How many units do I have to sell? And how am I going to do that? I mean, if you ask yourself those questions and you actually legitimately take time to answer it, it's going to help you in the long run, because it's going to inform all of your decisions, not just when the film's finished, but through the making of the film. And that's going to be very beneficial to you.
Yeah, and also, do you find also with the proof of concepts as well as packaging, there's a lot of things that are starting to come out in terms of proof of concepts to help distributors come along, especially when you're talking about an indie filmmaker who is new in their field, as well as also even some of the more established ones that are trying to get to that next level with proof of concepts. What's your opinion on those, as well as, like, can you see it useful in that in the vision? It's like, do you see also the aspects of the package changing, like, for your deliverables with that, if that was added in?
I might have like I may be the wrong person to ask about proof of concept, but I get a lot of people all the time that are calling me up and they're saying, I have a pilot for the series that I'm trying to make, can you help me sell it to whatever the platform is? And I'm like, well, from a distribution perspective, I'm not here, to help sell a concept. I'm here to
Yeah.
sell or to help sell fully finished content that's ready for the marketplace. And
Yes.
I think, unfortunately, whoever's out there telling filmmakers to make a proof of concept, a couple things are happening. One is they're telling the filmmaker to do that, but they're not telling the filmmaker where to go with it once it's done. They're pretending that magically all these proofs of concepts are going to just get picked up. And then the second thing that's happening is filmmakers are using up a lot of energy and resources just to make a proof of concept, where if they could have just added a few more minutes to their proof of concept, they would have a feature film that's ready for the marketplace. So I would say, spend your time building content that you actually plan on selling. And if you have a good success track record for selling what you're creating, people are going to come to you and ask you what you have next in the pipeline. And that's the appropriate time to make your pitch, for the next concept.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay. Go ahead.
yeah, and because also with it being more global, it's like it's like also the marketplace is also getting more global, which will feed also into our next question there as well. Because it's like also productions are becoming more globalized as we're finding more ways of doing films, more ways of distributing films. We're starting to become a huge global community in regards to that. So as it becomes more global, is there any changes in the demand for both filmmakers and audience taste, the way that they would want to see movies delivered to them?
I think, again, it comes down to like, there's a lot of ways to get your film into the world, but you shouldn't just make a global film just to have a global film. I mean, if you wanted to make something that appeals globally, you would follow what the movie studios do. They'll make a puppy dog Christmas movie, because now you have a dog that doesn't require a whole lot of dialogue, because the lips aren't moving. And if it did require dialogue, you could always dub it over in Spanish or French or whatever. And it's dogs. Everybody loves dogs. And it's Christmas, which is a holiday that's celebrated, in a lot of parts of the world, in a lot of different countries. Which, by the way, is why you never see too many Thanksgiving movies, is because there's not a huge overseas market for Thanksgiving movies. But in terms of global appeal of a particular film, unless that's your goal, to get the global appeal, then I would say make the Christmas dog movie. But if that's not your appeal and you don't quite have the budget for something big and global, then I would just focus on making the film, that you can make this year with the resources that you already have. Because I think that's going to feed into helping you along your career, a lot more than trying to make your film perfect,
Oh, okay.
or trying to make it appeal to the entire world.
Um, okay. Well, do you feel like the tentpole is going to remain, pretty stable, or is it a collapsing market because of all of the cross platforming?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like, tentpole films are awesome. But then it's a let's put it this way: they've always been a big risk with a high probability for a huge reward, or I'm sorry, with the probability for a high reward, or the probability for a complete and utter failure and flop.
Right.
So I would say that, just like any blockbuster film that comes out, it's a gamble. Like, you think that just because you put, you know, Harrison Ford in a film, I don't know why he's coming to mind, but you put a big actor in a film, and suddenly you think, oh, that's a sure bet. And it's not. The preference of the audience changes. And then every once in a while, there's films that you wouldn't think would do anything, and they end up being breakout hits. You're like, how the heck did that happen? Um, and I think that there's just something magic about the whole experience that makes it a little bit less pragmatic and predictable. On the flip side, though, I don't in any way think that you should just make a film because it's a lottery. I think you should have a plan A, B, and C, right? So if you get your plan A going, that's awesome. But what if that doesn't happen? Then what's your plan B or your plan C? And I think that's where a lot of filmmakers fall short, because they only have the plan A, And if that doesn't work out, there ain't no plan B.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
everything they've done is all invested in Plan A, and if that falls on its face, then they're kind of the whole project falls on its face because you don't have anything to go back to.
That's exactly, I see that a lot. I see that more times than I want to see because it's heartbreaking.
It really is, and it does. And a lot of times, it also comes to genre popularity as well as also the marketing itself. So I wanted to talk for a moment, though, also about marketing and talk about promoting in the
Sure.
market and how the division of the campaign, like for targets, at one point in time, from the distribution angle, at one point in time, distributors were like, we take over most of that. It's like, just give us the materials, we will create the materials. Where you as an aggregator also has that relationship with the filmmaker of a 50-50. From your perspective, how do you feel that the creatives have to adapt then now to this new environment in terms of marketing and marketing campaigns towards their target audience?
Well, you have to take into consideration that the whole model of independent film distribution has shifted from a business to business type model, whereas you give me the film, I give it to Blockbuster, they come back with an offer for 5,000 physical units, right? That was a B2B type business model where I knew the right people to call. I could make a deal, therefore, I could present value that you couldn't materialize on your own. Which was great, by the way, because then you had predicted sales, you had predicted expenses, you knew how much money each deal was going to make before you even got into it. And at the end of the day, it was up to Blockbuster Video to get a bunch of people paying a monthly membership fee. On top of that, like a rental fee every Friday night when they go there to see what the new arrivals are. But that's where you would shift the artwork, right? Because you would want to shift the artwork so that it looked really good on the shelf, and that's where distributors would dive in. The flip side is these days in the digital marketplace, distributors still pretend that getting a film into Amazon is the exact same as getting it into Blockbuster Video, and it's not. Instead of selling 5,000 units guaranteed, you know, once they get it up into Amazon, they're really hopeful that the filmmaker is going to go out there and promote the heck out of it so that they can make some money off of it. So this is no longer a B2B model, it's a business to consumer model. And if you're trying to market directly to the end consumer, it's a very expensive and a very risky proposition, which is why, again, to kind of circle back to some of my points made earlier in the conversation, it's the same reason why, again, distributors want to work with filmmakers that don't necessarily need a distributor. And their goal is to work with, entrepreneurial filmmakers that are going to go out there and hustle.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Now, yeah, it's like, well, nowadays with it's like, all the different platforms you have, machinima, virtual reality, VOD, phone, your phone, and all these other, multi-platforming becoming such popular trends. In your view or your opinion, what do you think, or how is that going to be changing the distribution model?
Um, I think it's. I think it's going to change the world. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
um, I can only imagine within the world of virtual reality, I'm going to walk down to my local theater in my virtual world and sit down and watch a film as though I'm in a movie theater, even though I'm in my virtual experience. So it's like
Right.
it's film within a film within a film. It's going to fundamentally change, I think, everything. But I think we're ripe for it. I'm getting like way off topic here, but when I can't sleep at 3 a.m. and I'm thinking about this stuff, if you look at the world of physical labor, boy, I'm really going off. But hear me out for a second.
That's okay.
A little whimsical here. But I think about it, right? There's a lot of jobs that used to be manual that are now being replaced by robots. And there's a lot of things as human beings that we don't necessarily need to do, especially in a thriving, first world or third world country. No, first world country. Sorry, don't want to confuse you two. But the one where we have like a really vibrant economy, and even though we complain about everything as human beings in our vibrant economy, like there's dinner on table, there's a roof over your head, and that's more wealth than like most of the entire world population. Um, so you see a lot of stuff being replaced by robots, but then as humans, you start asking yourself, like, what's my real value? Like, how do we live? And I think things are just going to get easier and easier for human beings if we don't do anything catastrophic. So one day, it's foreseeable that we'll live in virtual worlds and we'll have virtual currencies, and all of us will kind of, find our own happiness in our own little world, which is shared with like a lot of other people. Again, you've asked me like a very science fiction movie, so I mean a very science fiction thought, and I want you to know my response is based a little bit on George Orwell's 1984, coupled that's very dystopian and a joke, but couple that with there's a really good book I read out there called Ready Player One.
Yes.
Which kind of shaped my whole worldview. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. I got to credit that author for helping me think that way. And then on top of it, I put Oculus Rift on at one of those at the Toronto Film Festival. They had a little booth set up. And man, that technology is amazing. Like you put those virtual reality glasses on, or goggles, or whatever they're called, and you were transported somewhere else. Right. And I can only think that there's going to have to be like some sort of virtual economy that comes out of that. And that is my long-winded answer to say I don't know, but it's going to change everything.
So in other words, it's like in the long-winded answer is also that surrogates, the movie Surrogates, could actually come about one of these days.
Yeah.
I mean, like I know we're way off topic of the film distribution talk, but yeah, we see that happen in every industry out there, that there's changes and there's disruption and there's a little bit of blame placed every time that there's a new disruption that kind of knocks something out of the market. But from a few film distribution world, right now we watch everything on our televisions and in the movie theater. I think that's going to change.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more moving towards your phone or a tablet or something like that.
And then eventually virtual reality.
And wearable tech that we'll be watching it on a wearable tech as we're walking.
Or maybe not even watching. Maybe we're participating in the story. I mean, I've seen some of that play out too. Video games seem to be handling that pretty well, but I don't know. It remains to be seen. And I'd love to get into it. Like at some point, even the work I'm doing now, we're going to have to start facilitating virtual reality filmmakers and creators, and trying to figure out how to take their files and get them encoded the right way and get them into whatever that marketplace is when the time comes.
Absolutely. And this is also where it comes into educating the public. And I know that you also have the free film stuff site as well because of that reason, and also I'm sure others as well, of how that came as in evolution, as we had mentioned earlier. So you have materials for new filmmakers and resources on that site. So what do you think are like some of the key components that the newer filmmakers should be looking for a basic understanding before taking on even the distribution angles, productions? It's like, what are some of the resources that would be really, really great to educate from basic filmmaker to advanced?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit biased. I do have a website, and I'm proud of it. It's called filmmakingstuff.com.
Yes.
And I really just talk about entrepreneurial filmmaking on there. I don't necessarily know the best camera to use. I don't necessarily know how to light a scene. But I can help you start thinking about your film projects from a perspective of, okay, I'm an independent filmmaker. I don't want to work a crappy day job. How do I make this a viable business? And so that's always been my approach to it, which is like, thanks again to technology, both production and distribution, but we have the ability to create filmmaking as a small business. So you can create a studio from anywhere in the world and not just, create a product, but through some of these distribution channels, you can get it out to the marketplace. So the website filmmakingstuff.com covers all of that philosophy, and then for some of the more advanced filmmakers, I have a distribution package at howtosellyourmovie.com, and once again, it's called howtosellyourmovie.com.
Very cool. And therefore it's like also understanding what deliverables, how, where, when as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have this movie. How do you become a brand name?
Yeah, I talk about that. I talk about that a bit. Again, just to kind of dive into some of the things we covered, but I think it's important.
Yes.
I would start thinking about it before you even start making your film. If you have that, um, that kind of latitude. If you don't, then you should know that stuff and know how to answer those questions, before you start trying to talk to distributors, because they're going to want to know that stuff too.
Yeah. What do you think about places like the AFM and other markets? In regards to their aspects, and you found it to be a useful source in terms of keeping up with what's new.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, like AFM attracts a lot of foreign sales agents and distributors, and these are people that are looking to make deals all around the world. I think a trend that I'm starting to see is sort of like a virtual marketplace. And again, I'll use real estate as the analogy. There's a lot of websites online where you can look and try to buy a house. You're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff in the film trade, where I log into this website and I'll see that this film's available for England for the next 2 years, and I'm a guy that knows where to sell it in England, so I'll make that deal and I'll do it all virtually. Like, in other words, I'm a filmmaker and I want to sell it in England. Over there's a buyer and they want to buy something in England. Boom, let's make a deal through the internet. And we don't necessarily have to meet face to face in order to make that deal happen. So you're gonna see a lot more of that, and those companies already exist.
Very cool. And so, what do you think that the next big trend is going to be in projects in terms of that? We know that virtual reality is coming, but what in terms of distribution is going to be the next big trend? And if you can tell us maybe some of what your company's up to in terms of up and coming projects.
Well, I think the big trend that I'm seeing now, again, are filmmakers that get it. One of our biggest, a lot of the filmmakers that I talk to are entrepreneurial filmmakers that have been through the process before. They didn't like the deals that they got with the traditional distributor. They got in a lot of shenanigans, and now this time around, they feel like they can do much, much better on their own. So from that perspective, they're saying, you know what, I'm not taking any of those crappy distribution deals. I'm going to go it alone. And by the way, here's my market. Here's how I'm going to reach my market. Here's how many units I have to sell. And here's when I have to do it. So I think filmmakers taking more of an entrepreneurial approach to their filmmaking. It's not just an upcoming trend, but it's becoming the norm. And it has to. The idea of the set it and forget it attitude is definitely a thing of the past.
Yes. Especially since we're becoming a more branded society, it's like you've got to have an actual brand, something that people can latch onto, especially with social media, of having to be crowdsourcing all the time.
Well, there's a lot of that, and I think too, like budgets, right? So if you make something for more than $1 million, it's really hard to recoup that unless you have a very, very significant advertising, budget, or you have like, some sort of deal in place where people are going to promote it because it's so awesome, and you can reach so many people that you can possibly recoup that money. But like any business, I would keep the budget lean and mean, get it done, get a great product, and then get out there and hustle.
It's like and promote yourself and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So what it's like words of guidance would you like to impart upon the up and coming filmmakers? Your words of your wisdom. What would you like to impart upon them?
Well, for the filmmaker that hasn't made a film, I would say the best advice is asking yourself this question. Given the resources that I have right now, what is the film I can make this year? Because I think the biggest problem for a filmmaker that hasn't made a film is making the film. There's so many excuses that a lot of people come up with, but at the end of the day, they're just afraid to think creatively to get it done. It's never going to be good enough. Even if you make a film and you think it's good, 2 years from now you're going to look at it and you're going to think it's the biggest smiley piece of poo ever. So you may as well just make it because you're going to hate it later anyway. So get it done, right? So that you can join the ranks of other feature filmmakers. And so that's what I would say, and by no means would I tell you to do things that are unsafe or put, your production in any sort of jeopardy or violate any sort of safety hazard, etc. That's not what I mean by that. What I mean, though, is within reason and within creativity, within a realm of keeping everything and everybody you work with safe, what can you create that's awesome? And for some people it's as easy, like if you wanted to make a feature film tonight, you would just take your camera, you'd put it on your kitchen table, you'd place it so that you record your refrigerator for an hour and a half, and now you're a feature filmmaker. And you might say, well, that's the most boring film I've ever thought of in my entire life. And I'm like, I agree with you. So what can you do to make that scene exciting? Well, maybe somebody walks in front of the camera, and maybe they open up the refrigerator, and maybe inside the refrigerator is blank, 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 blank. I don't know, but here's the thing: is like you start thinking that way, and suddenly, between like a weekend of spitballing with your friends, and the next weekend, you might actually have the makings of a feature film that could very well be the next Paranormal Activity.
Right.
But here's the problem: is most filmmakers wait for everything to be perfect, or come up with 1,000 reasons as to why it can't be made. And if we're just talking, your first feature, you're wasting time. And then for veteran filmmakers, I would say, the world's changed so much that you absolutely have to partner with people that get this, that understand how to move the needle. And those would be through casting the right name actors / social media stars, and having a marketing plan in place that you control, so that when it comes down to getting your movie out there, you have a method and a means to do it.
So, in other words, probably one of the biggest roadblocks in, like I say, a new filmmaker making their first feature film is themselves. In other words, if you can get past yourself and just do it, and it's like you're on your way to becoming a veteran filmmaker.
Yeah, from my perspective, yes.
Yeah.
And also getting the right people together and the right marketing campaign there as well.
Correct. Yep.
So, also, that being said, is there any interesting projects also on your company's horizon that you're going to have us look out for?
Yeah, I mean, everybody that I work with are some of the most, they're the hardest working people I know. And I think we're just doing right by the filmmaking community, attempting every day to get better and better as a company. So the goal is to continue the path that we're going, and get more transparent and help filmmakers get more of the data that they need in order to improve their own independent film business. So a lot of what we're focused on is just solely focused on making the customer experience better and better every day.
And living with more transparency, because a lot of times that filmmakers tend to believe that aggregates as well as distributors, in terms of that they're not as transparent. So by doing it this way, they're also getting a more transparent, because they get a real-time feedback of who is actually consuming the films that they are actually doing, and what's coming back.
Correct. Yeah, and there's a lot of unfortunately, film distribution is probably the least sexy yet most essential part of the whole business. And a lot of other distributors have made it tough for the people that are actually trying to do a good job. So there's that. But we tend to have a good community of filmmakers that work with us, and we're all too happy to help them.
That is wonderful.
Awesome.
And also, Jason, we had talked about this earlier, and I wanted first of all, to thank you as well for coming aboard here for our interview. But I also wanted to know, how do we get you in social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jason Brubaker LA on Twitter, and then I have a Facebook page that you can find me at. It's filmmaking, or I'm sorry, it's facebook.com/filmmaking stuff, all one word. So you'll be able to find me that way.
Mm-hmm. And so also, Olaf, how do we get a hold of you as well in social media?
Well, you can stalk me on both Facebook and Twitter at Olaf Barbosa. But as I say, just don't stalk too close because I do get nervous and I do have an itchy trigger finger.
Yeah, and you can get me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Bizipedia, um, also on at Movietime Indie, as well on Twitter, as well as on individual sites. And as I've often said, if you cannot find me, you're definitely not stalking me hard enough.
There you go.
And I wanted to thank you so much, Jason. This has been an awesome interview, and if hopefully we can get back together again very soon and get more interview stuff coming together.
I love it. Thank you both for having me.
It's been awesome, Jason. It's like a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. And please make sure to stay in tune for our Friday show, everyone, because we have another wonderful guest coming up then. Take care.